So, male brains are also fluctuating based on testosterone fluctuating. So just set that aside to think that males are like these sort of stable, steady, like there's no such thing as like, emotional men who are the ones that like drive up the back of you really close and toot and all that kind of stuff in a car, and like who start fights and wars, etc. Like, I don't think it's the women that are the emotional ones here.
Yeah, sounds a little hysterical to me.
I think that men can be like big boys, babies, not even boys,
Hey, and welcome to the Forties Formula, your go-to place for insightful discussions on navigating the 40s and thriving in this transformative decade.
We're your hosts, Jasmin and Amanda, two women that are passionate about exploring the challenges and adventures that come with turning 40 and what lies ahead.
Today, we're diving into what I think is the most fascinating aspect of our health, our brains. And here to help us unravel the mysteries of our mind, we have Dr. Sarah McKay. Welcome, Dr. Sarah.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you for joining us today. Before we kick off, I know that your book, Demystifying the Female Brain, is not about the differences between men and women's brain, but I am intrigued. Can you tell by looking at a scan whether you are looking at a female brain, a male brain, and can you also see whether you would be able to determine whether someone is non-binary or how they identify just from the scan?
So if I was to just say I was a surgeon, before we get to the brain scan, say I was a surgeon and I was to open up a skull and look inside and look at a bunch of brains, and they were, the people were covered from the eyes down. You couldn't see who they were by their bodies. We wouldn't be able to look at a brain and go, that's male, that's female. It's not like they're pink or blue. You might see if you were looking then at 100 brains or so, you might start to get a little bit of a feel that some of them were a bit bigger than others, and you might go, well, the big ones are probably more likely to be male brains than female brains, because on average, if you looked at 100 brains, on average, the male brains might be 10% or so larger. But you might get really big female brains and really tiny male brains too. So, think about normal distribution curves. That, like from the outside in, is the kind of the largest clear sex difference that we see. But we certainly can't sort brains based on size just by looking at them from the outside. Now, brain scanning technology and data sharing and analysis has changed extraordinarily within the last 5 to 10 years. So for a long time there, we would scan a brain and you would do all of the data analysis looking at the size and the shape and the connections, etc. And you might have an MRI researcher who could scan, say, 20 brains over the course of a month, and they'd be analysing all of the data based, with their Excel spreadsheets. And even then, we might not really get be able to see any clear differences, particularly if we were looking at brain structure. If we started to look at brain function, sometimes perhaps we might see differences in connectivity, but again, it's not very clear and we can't kind of sort pink, blue, pink, blue, pink, blue. What we have been able to start to do recently is now scientists have started to kind of collaborate and share, like what we tell kids in primary school to do, and they're pooling all of their data together into large biobanks. So instead of, one scientist studying 17 brains here and another, if they were really lucky, had 40 to study, people are pooling their data together, and we can now look at 10,000 brain scans. It can all get pulled into a data bank, and then scientists can pull that data out and analyse it not just using an Excel spreadsheet. We're using machine learning and AI now to analyse that. And there's a lot of power in numbers. And so that has started to show very subtle differences that can be picked up by artificial intelligence when you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of brain scans.
I don't know about you, Jasmin, but one of the main questions I get from nutrition clients is where to grab a healthy meal when they're out and about.
Oh, all the time. And they're often happy to hear me recommend Guzmini Gomez, where clean is the new healthy.
GYG serves up honest, clean eats. No preservatives, no artificial flavors, no added colors, and no unacceptable additives. Basically, no nasties.
And that's part of the reason why I feel good bringing my family to GYG for a quick meal too. My boys love it. Plus, I know they're getting fresh, 100% clean food.
And it's seriously good stuff. The salsas and marinades are actually sourced from Mexico, so every bite has authentic Mexican flavors. And as a native Californian, I can verify that is legit.
Oh, you've got me hungry for my fave protein-packed burrito bowl. I love that I can double up on the protein to make it even more nutritious.
I'm a burrito bowl gal too. Extra spicy with double barramundi for me. And super easy to get since there are 18 locations all over the island with online and social media delivery options too.
We know where we're headed after the podcast. Now back to the chat.
So that's a different kind of way of thinking, can we see male or female brain differences? The thing is, when we're looking at differences, we're looking at, are we looking at size? Are we looking at a specific part of the brain, how it's kind of organised? Are we zooming in and looking at like different parts of the brain and how they function? Obviously, in a female brain, there's a part of the brain that's involved with ovulation. You haven't got that part of the brain in a male, but could you look at it and see a difference? No. Could you sort of zoom on in with your microscope and perhaps look at different kind of levels of chemicals or way neurons are organised? Maybe. So the differences that we're starting to see are these very subtle differences, but they can really only be picked up when you're looking at many thousands of people. We've then got this other problem. Typically what we do when we're looking at people's brains is we're looking at what we call like kind of weird populations. We're looking at like white male college students from America, because they're typically the people that might volunteer for these studies. We're not kind of looking at the diversity that we would see across a global population in terms of brains. So when we start to think about differences, we tend to think it's biological sex only that would be driving any difference we see. And biological sex differences tend to get amplified at puberty. So if we're looking at children's brains, we're not really seeing many differences. Differences that we might start to see might start slightly to emerge at puberty, a little bit. But there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. So I was talking yesterday, I actually posted something on Instagram about this. This interesting study was published in 2013, looking at how experiences of gender and gender equality and sort of different socioeconomic climates and countries influence brain differences. And this is interesting because they kind of ranked a whole lot of different countries by gender equality within that country. So countries like Sweden and Finland and Germany, are scoring really, really high on gender equality, and countries that are worse on gender equality are places like India and Turkey. So you can kind of get a ranking of countries. And what they found was that in countries with more gender inequality, male and female brains were more different.
Wow.
In countries with more gender equality, where males and females are more equal, their brains were more similar. And what is interesting is it's not the males' brains in any of those countries that differ. The difference is the women's brains in countries where there's less gender equality are more different than the others. And so here it's not just a biological sex difference that's driving that, it's the gendered experiences that girls and women have as they're growing up in those countries. Because, you're kind of growing a brain your whole life. So we're seeing more sex differences in countries where there's less gender equality. So it's not just sex differences that are driving. We can't say it's just because someone's male or because someone's female. The whole thing about like what is your gender identity is so new. We have got barely any research data in the neuroscience space on that. There have been no studies done this far. There have been a few little case studies, like let's look at this one person, like you've got a kid who wants to transition, give them puberty blockers, whatever, cross-sex hormones. We looked at like kind of one kid here or there. We have no evidence of what is going on. We have no evidence in terms of gender identity, what that looks like in a brain. I don't know whether it looks like anything. I don't think it's any different from identifying as like I identify as a New Zealander or an Australian, or you might identify as British or Singaporean or American, right? We can't really kind of pick that sort of thing up in a brain scan. So the whole current discussion around gender is very different from what I've just described, gendered experiences of girls growing up where there's inequality and adversity and perhaps lack of education.
Jasmin, there is so much information on gut health out there right now. And if we as nutritionists are tired of trying to wade through the oceans of probiotic strains and supplements to figure out what's best for our families, I imagine our listeners are too.
Oh, no doubt they are, which is why I love the simplicity and straightforward science of the berry, tropical, and ginger tonics from McKay Wellness.
Akisi's prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic tonics combine all the good stuff. Active probiotic species, real fruit ingredients, and billions of good bacteria in a drink that you can actually feel confident is what your family needs for better health.
I actually love doing a quick shot of the ginger tonic to get my anti-inflammatory benefits after a big workout. Oh, and my kids will definitely love the sweeter tasting berry, which I love since they get all their polyphenol, brain, and digestive health benefits.
For me, it's all about that mango, passion fruit, pineapple, tropical tonic, packed with antioxidants and beta-carotene for my immune system. It's actually amazing mixed with some sparkling water as a healthy, tasty mocktail at the end of a long day of recording in studio.
Our Singapore listeners can get an exclusive 15% off and free shipping with all orders using the code Forties on akisiwellness.com.
That's Akisi Wellness, AKESI Wellness.com. And now, back to the show. And when you say that the brains looked more similar or looked more different, are you referring to specifically the physicality of that brain, or are you referring to different reactions?
Yeah, I'm specifically referring to the physical sort of structure and volume of certain parts and certain brain regions in those women in countries where they've faced more adversity and stress and inequality and lack of access to education. So their brains are less similar to the males'. The males' brains anywhere in the world are all the same. The brains that appear to have suffered from, you could call it the patriarchy, are the girls' and women's brains in those countries with lower gender equality, because they haven't had access to the same opportunities, like literally the person, and therefore their brain hasn't had access to the same equal opportunities. So we're not just seeing here biological sex determining how a brain develops, it's the environment in which someone grows up. And we know that from other studies that have been done, looking at 10,000 looking at the brain scans of 10,000 kids kind of growing up, through infancy, childhood, through to, kind of early puberty. We've got data on that. Children who are experiencing more adversity in early childhood, so perhaps they're growing up in a really chaotic family home, they're growing up with abuse, they're growing up with extreme poverty, perhaps they're experiencing war or natural disasters. Those kids' brains will not develop at the same rate as children who don't experience that. What's really interesting is sometimes their brain age appears to be more advanced. It's almost like their brains have aged faster than the kids who have not faced adversity. If the children have been experiencing complete neglect, often we see their brains aging slower. So there you're going to be unpacking not only sort of adversity and trauma and socioeconomic class and status, but you've also got the experiences of gender in there. And in many parts of the world, it's girls that are suffering more than the boys, for some of those trauma indicators. So it's really complicated when we want to start to try and ask very simple questions about, are the brains different? We have to ask very sophisticated questions. Go, how different are the differences? What might be potentially driving them? Which population of people are we looking at? I said AI could sort male brain, female brain, with a reasonable degree of accuracy, maybe 80% accuracy, on the data set it's been trained on. So you train an AI on the UK Biobank data set, which is British people, but then can that AI then sort male, female brain sex differences if it's given the data from a Chinese data set or a Brazilian data set? It would need to be trained up on that data set because it might be picking up different differences.
And that would be like the nature-nurture sort of difference, because depending on where you grew up, your experiences are very different. It's fascinating.
100%. Yeah, and that's clearly what this gender inequality brain difference study showed. It's not just sex differences that are driving any differences that we see, it's gendered experiences, access to, all of the things that we know little people need to grow.
So when it comes to sort of male-female differences, obviously one of the big things is hormones and menstruating. And, you often get are you on your period? Is there any truth to this statement when women are in a bad mood? So how does our hormones influence our mood, our emotions during this time?
When we look at how brains go through puberty, and we're looking at female hormones and male hormones, essentially male and female brains go through puberty and they both go from having a child's brain to an adult's brain, and that's kind of driven by the sex steroid hormones, primarily testosterone in the boys and estrogen in the girls, but they kind of follow the same trajectory and get to the same result. It's not like they go like that, they just sort of track along together. But the pubertal hormones are driving that, but it didn't really kind of matter whether you were the male with the testosterone. Your brain was sort of patterned in utero to be primed to understand the signal of testosterone, and then the female was primed to understand the signal of estrogen, and those two brains kind of end up in the same way. What we then have is we've got fluctuations of hormones through the lifespan, and there's this sort of story that, well, females are more fickle in their brains, it's going to be harder to study brains because they've got cyclical hormones. Well, male brains also cycle based on, even if we look at sex steroid hormones, testosterone, their testosterone cycles through the seasons. So you've got high levels in autumn. It cycles based on parenting. So testosterone levels plummet in males when they are active caregiving parents. If they just are there for fertilization and then bugger off, their testosterone doesn't drop off 9 months later. They have to actually be involved in parenting. It fluctuates during the day. So, male brains are also fluctuating based on testosterone fluctuating. So just set that aside to think that males are like these sort of stable, steady, like there's no such thing as emotional men who are the ones that drive up the back of you really close and toot and all that kind of stuff in a car, and who start fights and wars, etc. I don't think it's the women that are the emotional ones here.
Yeah, sounds a little hysterical to me.
I think that men can be like big boys, babies, not even boys,
So Jasmin, I don't know about you, but lately I've been struggling to keep up with the grocery shopping. Between work and the kids and everything in between, it feels impossible to plan healthy meals without constantly running to the store.
Oh my God, I know exactly what you mean. I feel like I've got everything and then bam, something's missing. So that's why I've started using the Meat Club.
Okay, tell me more. This sounds like a total lifesaver.
They deliver high quality meats, fish and fresh fruit and veggies straight to your door. No more last minute grocery runs or stressing about what to cook. And everything is top notch to help you create a healthy and balanced diet for yourself and your family. They even have a flexible subscription service too.
Okay, I just had a look and that subscription service sounds amazing. You can get up to 15% off your basket, free mints for life on orders over $100. Plus, they offer over $160 worth of exclusive perks and give you the flexibility to edit your cart or change your delivery day anytime.
Just head over to the Meat Club and use our code TFF12 for 12% off your first order.
Just visit themeatclub.com.sg and give them a follow on Instagram at themeatclubsg for recipes, updates, and special offers.
Right, now let's get back to the chat.
Anyway, boys and men aside, I have teenage boys in my house and they're gorgeous and adorable. They are pretty emotionally level. There's not a lot of, let's just say, there are not a lot of roller coasters. Is that caused by hormones or not? I think we have to be really, really careful when we look at what creates any kind of emotional state in anyone at any particular point in time. And I always say, the brain is receiving a whole lot of data from our bottom-up biology, including our hormones, including our menstrual sex hormones. But we're also receiving data, from the food we've eaten and our posture and our muscles and, how much we've slept or not. We're receiving streams of data from the outside in world, primarily through our visual system, because we're very visual mammals, but also through what we hear and also smell and taste and touch. And we're receiving so much chaotic information, 20 centimeters from our faces nowadays, because all we're doing is looking at this thing, and this is streaming in a world war from the a war from the other side of the world that was on the other side of the world. It always is on the other side of the world. Well, it depends where you live, whether it's on the other side, but 20 years ago it was beyond the horizon, and now it's in front of your face, and you're expected to have an opinion on it and whatever, respond and react as if it's there. So there's a lot of information streaming in from the outside world, from the rising and setting of the sun to the crap on your phone to the other people you're interacting with. And then we've also got, our thoughts and our feelings, our psychology, our mind, our expectations, our previous experiences. And all of those inputs at any one moment in time are responding to, the status in our body and the context of the world we're in and the meaning that we're making of that to create an emotional state. Yet we tend to focus solely in on one of those little data points as if it is the primary driver of everything that we feel and therefore think and therefore behave, and that's often estrogen, or maybe progesterone if you're slightly more sophisticated and you're thinking about the female sex steroid hormones. So I always think it's really dangerous if we're going to kind of always listen to just one voice in the crowd or hone in only on that. And we are telling girls and we are telling ourselves from puberty that our menstrual cycles are synonymous. If you mix up a menstrual cycle and a brain or a reproductive incident like pregnancy or, another reproductive transition like menopause, that it automatically equals dysfunction and decline and emotional instability. And quite frankly, that's not the case. I do not think the neuroscience believes that. Social media might have you believe that. So studies I was really interested in digging into this when I wrote my first book, and I'm doing a 2025 edition update at the moment. So I'm like well down in the weeds of looking at all of that data right now. And it's interesting. And so I've explained how a brain creates an emotion. There's this story about PMS, and it depends whether it's the week leading up to your period or your period, depending on kind of which sort of story you tell, that women are just useless. We're angry, we're emotional, we're kind of incapable, we're weepy, we're all of the negative emotions, because there's only negative emotions, there's no positive ones. Mm-hmm. And I was interested in this, and I thought, well, I'm going to find out what are the rates of the PMS globally in the world, because I better put a number on it. And I found this fascinating meta-analysis which pulls together data from lots of different parts of the world, looking at rates of PMS reported in different parts of the world. And you can see a theme here in terms of the research I'm interested in. Let's take a global perspective of what's happening. And this was fascinating because it depended on which country you looked at, what were the kind of the percentages of women saying, oh, I have PMS, putting their hands up saying, yes, that's me. In France, it was like 10%, which I think is hilarious, because French women, they don't take no shit from anyone. They're not angry and not sticking up for themselves, but 10% of them put their hands up and say, yes, I have PMS. And then you go all the way to Iran, where it's 90%. And then all of the other countries in the world kind of fell somewhere between like 10 and 90%. And I was like, what is going on? Like 10% to 90%, like we can't really narrow it down any further. It averaged out at about 50. So I was like, if premenstrual anger and emotional instability is solely driven by hormones, why does it vary so much depending on which culture and society and part of the world you grow up in and you live in? So that was interesting. So a women's psychiatrist in New Zealand, Sarah Romans, has interrogated this, and there is a whole lot more kind of data kind of looking into this as well, where if you get women to record their mood in daily life, but you don't tell them what the study's about, because you don't like prime people to say, this is a study on PMS. So tell us about your mood in daily life and record it on your phone app, and every day we'll give you emotions to choose from. We'll give you like 10 negative, 10 positive and 10 neutral. Bear in mind, if you ask women to self-report emotions, they only ever report the negative ones. It's almost as if they haven't got the literacy to expand beyond the 10 negative, maybe neutral, and then happy, which is immediately skews data, right? So if you try not skew the data and not skew the expectations, we find out that most women in these type of studies are French, or at least French-like, and that it's about 10% of women are showing clear variation of negative mood based on day of menstrual cycle. So they put down mood, they put down menstrual cycle day, they were also asked about things like stress and social support and overall health and well-being. And what negative emotions tracked most closely to was feeling stressed, poor overall well-being, not menstrual day, but also most strongly social support. So French women are pissed off with the men. That's, like a sort of a trite, silly, stereotypical way of saying it. But most women, when they're blinded to what the study is on, are not reporting negative mood that always closely correlates with their menstrual cycle. About 10% of women are. And what we think, and this kind of emerges throughout the lifespan, that we do have these different groups of women. And instead of going, all women this or all women that, or 1 in 10 women, let's not look at the other 9, we've got different kinds of groups of women who have more or less perhaps sensitivity or susceptibility to fluctuations in hormone shifts. And that is very, very clear. That plays out in terms of what we might call premenstrual dysmorphia disorder. I think that's the serious mental health form of PMS. We're seeing
Dysphoria.
about 10%, sometimes 14%, depends which kind of data you're looking at. We're seeing that in terms of like women who are susceptible to strong shifts of hormones at other points in the lifespan, like postnatal depression, also depression around menopause. We see these kind of subsets of women. Some women are much, much more susceptible to these shifts, and other women are very, very resilient. And I think that that's really important to acknowledge that the experiences women are having are real. But if we're saying all women everywhere are kind of riding this roller coaster of hormones that we can't get off, we're removing a lot of agency for a start. What's the point? And we're constantly conflating hormones and reproductive status with dysfunction and instability and decline. And I don't think that that's what the data shows, and that's not how brains function.
Yeah. You mentioned it that the rate, from this self-report study was about 10%, right, with no other prompting. Is that similar to the rates of reported PMDD and the rates of reported postnatal depression? Or are we always looking at around 10%?
No, I wouldn't say these are the exact same groups of women, but there are groups of women who are more vulnerable. So if we look at kind of the end of the lifespan, look at, say, menopause, because that's all anyone talks about nowadays. It's just got discovered. It's having its moment. So women who experience depression through menopause, the highest risk of experiencing depression during menopause are women who have also experienced postnatal depression and perhaps also are experiencing PMDD, who have had prior episodes of depression that are related to hormonal shifts. That's not to say they are the only women that might experience depression then, or that if you experience that, then you are guaranteed to then experience depression at menopause. It's just that we understand these are the risk factors. And so there are clearly in some women, there are these kind of biological emotional vulnerabilities when there's big hormone shifts. And I think that that's really important, because I think, especially if we're the mothers of girls and girls are starting to go through puberty, and we automatically default to blaming their hormones or blaming their periods on emotional instability, or just being grumpy or weepy or whatever, we're not teaching them to have any agency over their emotional responses and to look at what else is going on. I mean, what happens when you're going through puberty? You're usually going from primary school to high school, depending where you are in the world, how the school system's structured. Here in Australia, kids are going from primary school to high school at 12. 12ish, 13ish. I mean, there's a lot going on when you're 12 and you're going from primary school to high school, and your friendship group changes, and you're changing your perception of yourself, your perception of your body, how other people perceive you, your friendship group. We know that the emergence of emotional instability through adolescence, the strongest predictor of that is not just when periods start or in boys when puberty begins, but how that kid perceives themselves tracking alongside their friendship group. So early developing girls are far more vulnerable than late developing girls, or girls that develop at the same rate as their peers. And the boys who develop earlier are often slightly protected, because what happens to them, their social status rises, because they're the ones that become the alpha in the group, and they're more protected. They may kind of go off the rails and be more vulnerable to risk-taking, but they're not typically as emotionally vulnerable as the boy who goes through puberty much later than all of his friends. He needs the support.
What about lifestyle choices? In your book, I read that, mild feelings of depression can attribute to poor lifestyle choices. Is there anything we can do to sort of help these feelings? And what would you consider as a poor lifestyle choice that could possibly trigger?
Gosh, did I use the language poor lifestyle choice? I might have to edit that one. If that's what I said. So I think that's probably a statement I would rephrase, in that I believe I said depression comes in many shades of blue, and mental health, there are as many potential causes or risk factors for, say, developing something like mild depression as there would be shades of blue. And we know that, often what we see when people develop mild depression, it's kind of situational, or it's reactive, or it's because, there was an incredibly stressful event. There is a very strong correlation between stressful events, whether that's starting high school or, a parent dying, or COVID. Like, who didn't find COVID stressful and hideous, and all the lockdowns? Who would ever want to go through that again? School closures, all of the things. That when we've got really stressful events, then those who are perhaps more vulnerable are more likely to go on to develop depression. It doesn't mean because you weren't doing all of the right things that's how come you got depressed. But we do know when it comes to something like mild depression, moderate to severe depression typically requires like proper medical help and care. And it depends where you are in the world, what the kind of the access to mental health services are like, and kind of, how you're going to be supported and funneled through that. Clinical practice guidelines here in Australia say you pitch up to your GP and you say, I wouldn't say someone my age because I'm 49, I would fall into a different, they'll be looking at different causes. Say, you're 18-year-old girl and you pitch up to your GP and you're like, I've been a bit blue, and they're like, have you just graduated from high school and you headed off to university for the first time and you've gone away to halls and you don't really kind of know anyone? We're not going to like slap an antidepressant on that problem. We need to be supporting someone there like with this sort of psychosocial kind of finding who they are and finding their feet and finding a good sort of social network and getting this, sleep sorted. You head away from home for the first time, you're probably not eating properly. All of your routines are out of whack. You haven't got your same family networks around you. Everything has changed. It's not because you made poor lifestyle choices, but if we can kind of almost ensure that supporting you through that transition of some good healthy lifestyle habits, you're going to be more resilient, and you might even be able to pull yourself out of that mild depressed state before it kind of heads off into something far deeper. And so there's all of the basics and all the things that mums would be telling their kids when they go off to uni for the first time, saying they're not doing. So, it's like making sure you're getting enough sleep, which is really hard. And I was a college student once, I was out partying all the time. But I had, great, strong social friendship group, eating good, healthy food, getting exercise, all of those things. So I think that those kind of, we call them lifestyle interventions, but I think we have to be really careful about that language, because it does kind of imply a little bit of kind of moral kind of judgment there, like, well, you didn't make the right choices and look where that got you. That's not what the message is. The message is, let's like put these solid foundations in place, and then we're going to be more likely to recover.
I love that.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's more, as opposed to the absence of these choices, you will fail. It's more like these choices could be protective. Why not give them a shot?
Yeah, they're going to help. And it entirely depends. So, the example I always gave, depends on the context, right? I gave during COVID, remember March 2020, wow, everyone's like losing them. We didn't know what was going on. I thought we might die.
Zombie apocalypse.
And then, you might say, well, you're feeling really stressed, as if, well, make sure you have your daily walk, make sure you go and do your exercise. And when your world is filled with uncertainty, and no one had certainty, so you couldn't seek certainty from anyone else either. So if you went out for your daily walk, what you didn't need to do then was go and explore some new bush path you'd never run down before, or go wandering around a suburb you'd never been, or kind of go and do something new and curious and exciting, because there was enough uncertainty without not knowing what was down the road and round the corner. So in those instances, if you were to go and exercise, I would say follow the same path every day. Get the exercise in, but if you're following a certain path, like literally a certain footpath or a path through the bush or whatever. I live near the bush, so I walk in the bush a lot. You know exactly what's coming next and you know what's around the corner. You're putting some certainty back in. So simply exercise to help make you feel better works, but sometimes we can like kind of tweak how we are, the choice of exercise. I've got a dance class I go to weekly with all my friends. I'm in a musical theatre group. I can't sing or dance. I'm basically like as coordinated and graceful as a camel. But I'm there I've got the vibes and the enthusiasm. We just have like so much fun. It's exhausting, but it is so fun and funny.
I think that's a bumper sticker we need. There for the vibes.
And that's as much for the collective as social laughs that we have when we're not doing a performance for us to get together and dance.
And, at the end of the day, if you've got the enthusiasm for it, the motivation to do it, that's all you need.
There's so many ways you could exercise for mental health.
Although that's Amanda's game.
Yeah, speaking to a competitive CrossFitter, but I feel you. Yeah, it's familiar for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like do CrossFit, don't do CrossFit, walk, don't walk, ride your bike, do ocean swim.
Oh
I love ocean swimming. Everyone who I know who ocean swims at the moment is loving it because there's loads of Port Jacksons, which are a type of shark.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't. I've got a fear of open water.
And everyone's, oh my God, there's so many, we call them PJs, there's so many PJs. Everyone's excited, sharing photos of all of the sharks that we're seeing. Lots of people wouldn't find that very exciting and a very fun, thrilling way to exercise. So it depends, right? You do what works.
And so obviously during the sort of time of perimenopause when your hormones are fluctuating, can hormone replacement therapy and actually having estrogen or even micronized progesterone help with balancing out those mood fluctuations that some women feel? Do you think there's a place for replacement therapy?
100%. I'm not at the point of saying put it in the water, but I think that there are enormous benefits in terms of treating symptoms. We don't know whether there are, despite every social media menopause influencer out there saying you'll live longer and you won't die and you won't get dementia and you won't get heart disease. We simply don't have the data where we can clearly say, and we certainly do not in the dementia space, say HRT will prevent all of these. We don't know what the long-term protective consequences are. We're pretty sure it's not causing heart, it's not going to like give you dementia, but do we know it's going to prevent dementia? At the moment, it's kind of sort of neutral. What we can say is that we know what hormone replacement therapy at perimenopause, when your hormones are kind of going up and down, and each month it could be something different. We do know what it does do. We know that the most obvious sort of objective measure would be hot flashes and night sweats that are waking women up. And we know if you put estrogen back in, women who are experiencing them, it typically helps. It doesn't like completely obliterate them. It doesn't quite touch the sides in everyone, but it helps quite a lot. What we do not know is, are perhaps some of the secondary consequences perhaps improved mood, or perhaps and the data for brain fog is really unclear as well. Is that because we're putting estrogen in, or is it because women are sleeping better because they're not waking up from the night sweats? We actually don't know. What would be really useful to know is if we stop the night sweats and the hot flashes with a different type of drug that wasn't estrogen, would we see any consequences? Because there's been a couple of really, really small studies. There's a researcher called Rebecca Thurston and another researcher called Pauline Mackey, and they're like really interested in that kind of like this, not the long-term health consequences, but almost like the kind of the knock-on symptoms. Are they due to the disruption of sleep, or are they due to the drop of estrogen? And if we treat the hot flashes, do we see improvements? If we can treat the hot flashes using drugs that are not hormones. And I think we're just kind of at the point in time where we've got a few new medications coming in on the market, depends where you are in the world, whether they've been approved or not, where that they specifically target the neurons in the hypothalamus of the brain, which are responsible for the dysregulated thermoregulation. So your body's thinking you're much, much hotter than you are, so it's doing this extreme response to cool you down which is where all the hot flashes come from. At night, it's giving you a hot flash and you're typically under covers, and so then like you're starting to sweat heaps, but then your body's going, well, this isn't working. Your brain's going, this isn't working. I'm going to have to wake her up. So then this sort of shot of adrenaline goes through your body to kind of wake you up. And so then you wake up enough to be able to take the covers off and then cool down. Now, is it like that massive sympathetic nervous system activation and that adrenaline that's going through your body, is that what's causing perhaps anxiety? Is that what's perhaps then leading on to depression? We don't know. We don't have that data. There are a lot of people out there making these grandiose claims that replacing these hormones will fix everything. But we have also, the data's not clear on that. We've got data showing hot flashes, night sweats reduce, sleep often improves. We don't necessarily always then see an improvement in brain fog in those women that are suffering from brain fog. Perhaps it's going to take like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 months to improve. We're not necessarily always seeing, this kind of cure of depression, because depression isn't just caused by estrogen or not estrogen. It's caused by masses of contributing factors. You're going to have to like kind of pull and tweak on lots of different levers in there. So the menopause hormone therapy space is super interesting. And all of the global guidelines, doesn't matter whether you look at Australasian Menopause Society, US, UK, etc. They're very, very careful about making claims that are based on the best available pooled evidence that we have. Not cherry picking this paper here and that paper there because I'm charging you $3,000 for my clinic consultation, and so I need you to think that this is the best thing ever and come and see me. They're making recommendations based on the best available data that we have, and the best available data supports the symptom relief in the moment. A bit of data around osteoporosis long term is still unclear. Might change in time. If more data comes in and we can say, yeah, hey, it's going to help slow the rates of dementia, great. Dementia is really interesting because people there's more women than men have dementia. 2 out of 3 cases of dementia are in women, not men. And they're reporting on prevalence, which is different from incidence. And I'm not going to get into the stats, but if we had a look at like 1,000 men in their 70s and 1,000 women then in their 70s, say in Europe, the numbers of males and females out of that 1,000 that are getting diagnosed with dementia are pretty similar. Once you get into your 80s, then there are more, slightly, you might get like 16 out of 1,000 versus 12 out of 1,000 are being diagnosed per year with dementia. It's not like this massive difference, but because there's more old ladies alive, there's more cases, but the incidence really only starts to diverge slightly in your 80s. And then it depends which part of the world you're looking in. In some parts of the world, even people in their 80s, there's not an incidence difference between males and females. But you go into low middle income countries, particularly low countries or lower socioeconomic status people, then you do see a bigger sex difference emerge. So we're so caught up, particularly right now in this online menopause influencer space, that hormone loss at menopause is leading to dementia. They don't understand any of the incidence stats that are out there looking at what's going on in different countries. So people have to be very, very careful because data is complicated and complex diseases have complex origins.
I mean, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I feel like we can talk to you for hours.
Yeah, we have so many more questions.
So much I want to ask you, but we are coming to the end of the interview. But before we finish up, can I just ask, what is your Forties Formula? If you were to put together a formula which will help women who are in their 40s thrive, look after their brains, what would you say would be the way to move forward?
Well, sleep. If you're not getting a good night's sleep, everything else will just utterly fall apart. And I'm obsessed with getting a good night's sleep. And I nap, and everyone who I know who strategically naps is usually a good sleeper at night because you lean into sleep and you love sleep. And I'll do anything in the world to protect my sleep. It's number one. The next is just stop taking everything. So there's not just enough self-deprecation and lack of seriousness. Like the women I hang out with, like say in my dance group and who swim, and they're just so funny and self-deprecating, and we just have so many laughs about ourselves and at each other's expense, and we just don't take it all too seriously. So having like some kind of social group where you can just like enjoy that, I think. Like laughing at each other is quite funny. Not in a mean way, but like we have just so much fun. And so like just having the right kind of sort of social networks around you, and not like just taking it all so seriously. And then I am very fortunate because I was an S, another S, sleep and social, and it's like the sea. Like that is the place I'm looking out at it right now. I'm very fortunate. I could see it out the window. Just having somewhere where everything kind of washes away. Like, you know, that place you can go and, you know, salt water, get in under the sea, and everything is cured.
So sleep, social networks, and
the sea. The 3 S's for success.
And swim after the shark, not away.
Yeah, and the odd PJ.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was wonderful speaking with you today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Have a great day. After talking to our amazing guests all day in studio, we need a good drink to refocus, and let's be honest, we could use a dash more energy too.
Oh, I totally feel that. There's so many energy drinks out there are packed with sugar and so much caffeine that you end up crashing hard.
That's actually why I switched over to Flojo, Asia's first productivity drink. It hits the sweet spot for me between needing a little bit of a boost, but not wanting to chug a bunch of caffeine. And Flojo actually has 80% less caffeine than your average coffee with no added sugar.
I also love that Flojo is a functional health drink. It has 7 organic nootropics and adaptogens, things like reishi mushroom for a stronger immune system and rhodiola for mental resilience. But the fruit and tea flavors are still light and fresh, not weird.
Flojo actually helps me stay calm and in control. So when I get home after work, I can just be immediately present with my family, not all jacked up and jittery like I might feel after a later day coffee.
Even better, they offer a 14-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it without any worry.
And you can get free shipping when you order directly from their website at www.drinkflojo.com.
Guys, you know how much we love coffee. And if you want to show us some love, you know you can get us one.
Just visit buymeacoffee.com/the40s formula. Cheers. Before we go, please remember to hit subscribe and take a moment to support the 40s formula by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform.
Your reviews will help us to reach more people and allow us to continue to bring valuable content. It should only take a moment, and it's a free way for you to support the show.
You can also stay updated with the 40s formula by following us on Instagram at the 40s formula, all one word. We share behind-the-scenes insights, episode updates, and much more, so please be sure to hit that follow button.
We appreciate your time and support. Thank you for being part of this community, and we'll be back next week for more empowering conversations with inspiring guests.
Bye.
Bye. I would love that, you know, that whole sort of Aussie vibe, you know, being close to the beach. We've got Sentosa, but it's not quite the same.
Oh, it is not the same. Because I assume when you say the beach, you're also referring to like surfing and actually doing things in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Singapore's water is not made for that, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, their high school is right by the beach, so they just can go down. In fact, they have surfing at school. They have beach sports at school and stuff, so they just head down for a swim after school.
Wow. And have you ever been to Singapore before? Or have you come here?
I have. Once a very long time ago, before you could fly to Ireland via Dubai.
Wow.
And now we don't have to go via Singapore and London. You just go straight. So I haven't been to Singapore since Emirates basically started.
Oh yeah, no, I think Singapore's changed.
It was a long time ago. Unfortunately, unfortunately, I got food poisoning when I was in Singapore.
Oh no! And that, we hold ourselves up for our food culture and our sanitation. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It sucked. So yeah, I didn't have the best trip. And then after we went to Borneo straight after me and my husband. We met in Singapore and went to Borneo, and that was where we got engaged.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, so a good memory from Borneo to kind of cover up the food poisoning in Singapore.
I would love to have spent more time in Singapore, seeing Singapore, but it was, I spent a lot of time in my friend's bath.
Yeah. Oh, the worst.
Maybe